Our brains are like wired to be negative and fearful, and we're pumped full of that information. So just to become aware of it is a huge step forward.
It's very easy to get wrapped up in our own stuff. And the fact of the matter is that any situation we're in can be viewed in many, many different ways. You can go top down, meaning change how you're thinking, and that will influence your body. Or you can change what's going on in your body, and that's going to influence your mind and how it is that you're thinking there too. If that's the perception that we have, man, it does. It's a game changer.
That's what flow is, right? When your ego kind of steps aside and you have this experience of life flowing through you, unobstructed.
For me, three things happen, and they need to happen in this order for us to move ourselves in a little bit better direction. Number one is...
Brian, is super stoked to meet you. Thanks for joining me on the Mark Divine Show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to have a good conversation. We have some things in common, but a lot of things that are unique, which is par for the course with a lot of my guests. So I'm curious, first off, you're a father to a young lady, a young daughter. Mm-hmm. I imagine the way you wrote that in your bio, you're a solo father?
Yeah, I am a single father. Now, I guess it's been 9 months at this point, moved in with my fiance, and she has two boys that are on either side of my daughter. My daughter's 10, about to be 11, and her boys are 9 and 12. So it's been a fantastic addition. They fight, they argue, they laugh, they have a great time. It's like they're siblings. It's wonderful.
Step-brother sandwich.
Yeah.
Goes between. Okay, yep. Well, that's going to be a big change for her.
Yeah, it is. She has a sister with her mom that's older, but she's never been really around other kids that were her age. I was a foster parent, too, for about 4 years. She would complain all the time. She's like, why can't you get any kids in here that are my age? I'd have a 2-year-old in, and I'd have a 16-year-old in. Like, no kids her age ever showed up at the house. So she's happy to have them to play with.
What has been both the biggest joy or blessing as well as the biggest challenge for being a father?
The biggest blessing are the smiles. I don't know how to say any different than that. I mean, every time I see her face light up with joy, I mean, true joy, not just, walk around just regular every day, but the things that, I'll say something or I'll let her know we're going to do something. Or she recently found rock climbing. That's her cool thing. And so when she, she'll come off a wall that was really hard and she just has this genuine smile on her face. It makes my heart warm up every single time. I'd say the biggest challenge is dealing with my own insecurities and fears because, she's my responsibility and I want to set her up for success. I want to give her what she, I don't want to say needs, but all of the resources that really set conditions for her to thrive. And that's on me. And that's a big responsibility. And I know that. And so I'd say that's the biggest challenge is just managing my own fears.
Yeah, it's interesting. People project all sorts of things onto guys like you and even me, and they think, well, you must be the perfect father because of, hey, you're a former Navy SEAL and you're a coach to, elite people. So fatherhood must come easy. Do you get that a lot? And you're thinking, no, it's actually not, right?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on in other people's heads. I only know what's in my head. And I realize that, truly... It's funny. I don't know. Maybe you find the same thing. I do have to take my own advice more often than you'd think that I should. I don't know. When I talk to other people, I hear that because it's an outside view. I'm not really involved in a first person way with their lives. I'm hearing from the outside, and so I don't know if it's easier to have clarity or easier to provide certain types of advice. But with my own daughter, sometimes I really do have to take that step back and say, what would I say to somebody else having this issue and try to take the advice that I give. So, yeah.
In fact, you just kind of touched on a really powerful practice, which is to have a second person kind of dialogue with yourself, right? To treat yourself as your own client. If you're a coach or even if you could, take it from the perspective of like talking yourself from your higher power, and you're talking to your ego, the part of you that's full of fear and doubt and uncertainty. There's actually been studies on that, so it's actually very useful practice.
Yeah, to be able to step outside. Yes, I fully, wholeheartedly agree with that. It's very easy to get wrapped up in our own stuff and to get completely immersed in all of our perspectives and really treat our perceptions and our thoughts like reality, like treat them like they are objective truth. And the fact of the matter is that any situation we're in can be viewed in many, many different ways. And all the people around us are viewing them in other ways.
That's right.
So we certainly can step outside and see things from different perspectives. But it takes, number one, an awareness that that's what we're being engrossed in and locked into. And then number two, I think some skills, some techniques, some ways of helping yourself get out of that particular stuckness.
Hi, Mark Devine here from SealFit. After 2 years of development, I'm super stoked to announce the launch of SealFit supplements and our first product, SealFit Electro Greens. This is the highest quality organic greens you can find, combined with electrolytes into one powerful supplement. Take with 8 ounces of water in the morning or add to your smoothie to get your day kicked off right with the proper nutritional supplementation and hydration support. And you can also use it as a pick-me-up booster during the day or after a workout. It dissolves immediately, and believe it or not, it tastes great. I've had many testimonials already saying it's the best tasting greens that they have ever tried. So, hoo-yah, SealFitSupplements.com, or you can find it on Amazon by searching for SealFit Electro Greens. Hoo-yah. Let's do this. Divine out. That is delicious.
Yeah, I want to come back to those, and as they relate to you personally, because what I found, and this is sort of what we're talking about, we're touching on, is in a lot of cases it's easier to coach. If you're a performance coach like yourself, or even athletic coach, it's easier to help others activate or achieve or refine the way they're thinking because you have that. You're able to hold up that mirror and you can see the behaviors. But it's less easy for yourself, right? To manage yourself and to coach yourself and to live what you're coaching or professing to be kind of a way. So it's really important that coaches like yourself and I really kind of embody the principles that we teach and lead by example. So I'm curious, how do you do that? Like, how do you embody what you coach to elite athletes and to the people that you coach? What are your practices?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I start every day by journaling and reading. Mm-hmm. That's every day. I get up in the morning, and yoga. I've started doing that. There's always been some sort of exercise in the morning. When I get up, I'll do something. And I've kind of cycled through various things at different points to try to find the thing that really I need when 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning hits, what does my body need? And it's not a full-blown cardio workout. I found that out.
Right.
And it's also not just some gentle stretching for 5-10 minutes. It's more than that. So I found that yoga has been incredibly helpful for me. So I get up, I go do yoga, I sit down with some coffee, and I journal. I journal for a little bit. I try to not journal about just details. Okay, here's what the day is going to be. I try to journal about what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, where my mind is, what kind of mood I'm experiencing, and what kind of mood I'd like to experience, and how I'd like to interact with either specific people or even the world at large during the day. And then I read little snippets from any number of books. Currently, I have Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I have a collection of Seneca's works. I have my own book that I wrote. I try to read through that again. You say practice what you preach. Well, I've written it, so let's remind myself about it and put that into practice too.
That's a good one. I got to start doing that.
Yeah,
every time you read it, though, you're like, well, hey, this is a new perspective. It's a new you. Sometimes I'm wondering who it was that wrote those words.
Mark, it's pretty amazing, right? And it's that way with other books. I've read Meditations. I don't know. I think I'm on my 5th iteration at this point of that. Every single time you read one of those books that really has some wisdom in it, and the book hasn't changed, and probably the message of the author hasn't changed, but we've changed. We're different. We have had different experiences, and we have different knowledge, and so our viewpoint is a little different. So I think it's incredibly valuable to reread books. In fact, I think Seneca says that in one of his writings, and I know Ryan Holiday is another one that harps on that, is, don't just read stuff once and then throw it out. It's not about quantity. Really get into an author that speaks to you and get into their work and read it not once, but twice, 3 times, 4 times, and really try to understand where that person's coming from. I've found that very valuable. So I have this stack of books, and it cycles with different things. I've read the Bhagavad Gita. I've read different Upanishads and just different texts, that have wisdom in them. The Bible, read a couple times. So just a lot of the books that have wisdom in them. And I try to just read a little bit and let it soak in. And when it does, I have little sticky notes that are next to me. And I write down what stuck with me on the sticky note, a little thing. So my first book, that's where it came from, was just those sticky notes. I'd take the sticky note, turn it into a 300 to 400 word essay, and that was it. The book didn't really even start out as a book. I didn't intend to write a book. It's just sort of
Just
what
a bunch of
emerged
sticky
from
notes.
that work that you're talking about.
What do you do with these sticky notes? Are they like all over your bedroom?
They're right here in this baggie.
Oh, look at that.
The whole,
You got a collection of sticky notes.
baggie. So many
That's
times.
a treasure trove, man. Every time you need a little inspiration, you just dip your hand in, pull it out.
Yeah, or
That's terrific.
if I feel like writing, because writing's a way that I can escape the world and get into my bubble and really start to collect my own thoughts and get myself situated. That's a tool that I've used that's been very powerful. So you're right. If that's where I am, then I get the baggie, pull out the sticky note, and go to town with whichever one came out.
I found that I speak very differently than when I write. Like it's almost two different languages or two different perspectives. Because when I write, I get really into a flow state. And the same as when I speak. Sometimes when I speak, like probably you have this experience, like you have no idea where those words are coming from. It's not something you had ever thought about before. But I have that experience also when I write, but then I can step back from it and begin to like poke holes in it or contemplate it and flesh it out a little bit. And so writing for me it is a cathartic process. It's a very, very creative process. I once tried to have one of my books written in an interview style format where, another kind of editor / ghostwriter would interview me and then write the chapter. And then theoretically it was kind of 90% done. I ended up rewriting every single word of the entire book.
Yeah.
So I'll never do that again.
That's interesting. I've actually thought about, just for the sake of expediency, trying to turn on one of those speech to text
Yeah.
programs and just talk the book, just speak it. But I'm like you. My thought process of writing is very different from it is from speaking, and it just wouldn't work.
No, it wouldn't. Save yourself the time and the frustration, because I tried that as well. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to ever use any of this. So interesting. What about your kind of your origin story? Like, how did you get on this path where you are today? And then how did you become a stuntman? I mean, that's cool. I want to learn about that.
It is an interesting path. I still ask myself that same question sometimes. How the heck did you end up here?
Right.
What happened there? I'm originally from Nashville, and I graduated high school here, went to college at Rutgers in New Jersey, where I did not graduate. I went to college just, I don't know, because that's what you were supposed to do. I mean, that's
right.
what I'd been told.
You were following the dream, right?
Yeah, you graduate high school, you go to college, you get a job, you get a family, you do all the things. But that's not how it worked for me. I got to college and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And then I ended up having a friend who was the company manager of the Batman stunt show at the Six Flags in New Jersey.
Batman stunt show.
Yeah,
The story's getting good.
And I went to see the show, and I was floored. I was amazed. I couldn't believe that was something people did for a job. And because it was my friend who was the company manager, I was able to go backstage and talk to the people, which I did, and that was fascinating. And I said, how do you get this job? They said, well, you got to know how to do fights, high falls, and motorcycles. And then you come to the audition and maybe get the job, maybe you don't. So I went away, and over the course of that year, I linked up with one of the guys. He taught me how to do high falls and fights. And then I bought a dirt bike, and I practiced around on that a little bit, went to the audition, did get hired, originally as an alternate, but then the second day of rehearsals, one of the main guys got hurt and got bumped up the ladder. And so then I did that season. It was the summer after my junior year, and it was truly one of the best times of my life. Every day, I loved going to work. I was not only doing the shows, but I was trying to get better on the motorcycle. So in between shows, I'd get on the dirt bike, and I would practice.
So you weren't, at this point, you weren't stunting for movies. This was an actual show. Like
No, it was a live
trying
show.
to mimic what they did in the Batman movie. Is that what it was about?
Yeah, it was the same characters. There was the Joker, and
Right.
I forget what the first show was, what all the characters were. I was the old Robin at one point. I don't know. I was a bad guy through most of it, riding the motorcycle. But yeah, they mimicked the characters from the movie, and they put it together in a 15-minute show for the theme park. But it was great. I mean, we had motorcycles. We had a little dune buggy thing. We had some high falls, some fights. later in some other shows, we had some rappels and different things. So it was a wonderful training ground too. I mean, that was just a perfect place to practice these skills and just get really good at doing them over and over and over again in front of people. So I did that summer, and then I came back to Rutgers for my senior year and just couldn't focus. I was failing everything. And so I just dropped out. I just dropped the courses before I did fail. And I stayed long enough to do the show during the summertime that year. And then I moved to LA. And I had managed to get into the Screen Actors Guild too when I was out in New Jersey, just being an extra on a movie called IQ with Tim Robbins and Meg Ryan, I think it was. I was just an extra for enough days to get in the union. Moved to LA, and they had the same stunt show at the Six Flags out in LA. So I was able to pick up doing that job while I was pursuing the film and TV work. That was the key into the TV and film work, because the group of people that I was working with became like a class, like a cohort that we just kind of we came up in the business together. So now, 25 years later, those are the guys that are running the shows. Those are the guys that are running. Good friend of mine running Stranger Things. He's one of the guys that came out of the show. There are a lot of other shows. So that was a really good time. And then I just kind of made it into the film and TV world. And I did manage to make it back to Rutgers and finish the bachelor's degree and continued on with a master's in sports psychology and a Ph.D. in organizational psychology, but never with the intention of actually working, using anything to do with those degrees. It was just because I enjoyed the material. I enjoyed learning. I really became fascinated with the power of the mind and how it affects our performance and our overall well-being, and just the connection between the body and mind and how that works. It was something that I loved reading about, I loved listening to, I loved writing about. So I just continued with that path. Well, then life does what it does. Next thing you know, I find myself in Washington working for the Army as a performance psychology consultant. Did that for a couple years. And back then, that job was just sport and performance psychology applied to soldiers, meaning it was, how do you get your mind right to shoot better and get in shape faster and do medical tasks better and clear rooms more efficiently, like just performance-based training for how do you get your mind and body connected so that you're at your best. Then I left and went back to LA, did stunts again for another 4 or 5 years. Went back to the Army, but this time back in Nashville. I moved back to Nashville to Fort Campbell and did the same job, but this time the program had expanded. It had branched off into a resilience piece as well, meaning that a lot of the same skills and concepts and techniques were taught, but they were applied differently. The purpose, the intent was different. The intent this time was, let's give people some tools and resources that they can use whatever's going on. They can handle the situation better. If they get knocked down, they can get back up again and get back going again more quickly, and not even to where they were, but be better, learn how to grow and to thrive as a result of the challenges that they faced. And I really gravitated toward that. So I moved a little bit away from the sport performance piece and more into that resilience piece, and taught classes all around the world with that. It's a fascinating experience. And then, I don't know, I just outgrew it and ended up quitting that job a couple years ago, starting my own business, which was Begin Again Performance Psychology. Then I'm going through a rebrand now. Now it's Brian Hite Global. But yeah, I did that. Been working with athletes. I've been working with police officers. I've worked with real estate agents. I've worked with actors. It really, the connection with that holistic mental, physical, emotional connection, like that piece is missing from so much training. We get a lot of technical, tactical, and even a lot of physical, but we don't get that mental, emotional piece and how that fits in. So being able to provide that for people and see the power of that learning and their application has been really rewarding. I'm a faculty member at Grand Canyon University too. So I'm able to, through my students, stay up on some of the research that's current and be able to apply some of that. So it just truly, the stunt thing, and I'm still doing stunts. I mean, that's something I still do. I worked on a show last month, got another one coming up. It's something that all my friends are in that world, and I love it. I love it. So any opportunity I have to go work on a show, I will take it. I also love the learning about and sharing this knowledge of how do we flourish, really flourish, not just target, get better physically or make our minds stronger, or it's everything together, physical, mental, emotional, social. How do we get along with other people? Spiritual. How do we connect to things larger than ourselves? We're all part of something bigger. So how do we take all that and apply it regularly, daily, to our own benefit, but also the benefit of those around us? That's where I really get a lot of energy.
Likewise, I think it's fascinating. We share so much kind of common ground there. You could look at the Navy SEALs as a big stunt job, right? Except with a little bit more danger because someone's shooting back with real bullets. And when I was listening to you, that the link or the bridge between performance psychology and being a stunt person, it started in your own mind. You had to develop certain capacities to be able to manage the fear and, to develop that resilience in yourself and that kind of that focus and that flow state and that calm, under the pressure of the performance moment. So talk to me about, like, not with your professor hat on, right? But your personal hat, like what's going on in your internal state in an individual moment and then a little bit over time, like in terms of preparation for an event, the before, during, the after. Like, how do you develop the capacity to thrive and flourish in spite of the high risk that you take on in that stunt world?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up before, during, after. One of the things that we at Fort Lewis, when I was working there, came up with and published in one of the journals that are out there, sports psychology journals, is this notion of a 4-phased approach to performance. And there's a before, during, and after, but we added in a right before. So there's a before, a right before,
the kickoff,
a during, and an after. And
the 3, 2, 1 go moment. Right?
Yeah, and it's when performance is imminent. And to me, that is probably the most important time. The other times are obviously important too. How are you preparing? What's the before? How are you setting yourself up for success? The during, obviously, what are you doing? How are you keeping your attention where it needs to be and keeping, your efforts at the level that they need to be? And after, how are you recovering? How are you learning from that experience? But that right before will make or break performance. And that is where many people lose it. The energy activation levels go off the charts. The emotions start to spiral, and they don't know how to find that place, that right spot, like you called it, being in the zone. I call it the bubble. That's the part. When we're in the right before, I get myself in what I call the bubble. And that's when the outside world goes away. There is nothing at all relevant to me in that moment that's not task-oriented. So if I'm on a set, that for me, the right before begins when they say, okay, Brian, we're ready for you on set. Because before then, we may have done the rehearsal, we've gone through all the stuff, I know what I'm going to do, but I'm just kind of hanging out. And that may be an hour. It might be 14 hours. You never know how long it's going to be. So you can't maintain that energy level the whole time.
Right.
But throughout that beginning time, I do stretch every now and then. I do periodically engage in mental imagery. So I'll go through in my own mind in different ways what I'm going to do. If it's choreography, I lock that in. If it's something else, I lock that in too. But when they say, okay, Brian, we're ready for you on set, that's it. That's the cutoff. If I was on the computer, if I was on my phone, if I was having a conversation, if I was doing card tricks for somebody, everything goes away. And it is just that task, just that moment.
And what do you do to collapse your task? Like what mental process goes on? Is it automatic now, or do you have like a mental checklist?
Well, it has become automatic, but for me, it begins with breath, because I change my breathing and I immediately check in with my energy activation level. Because when I hear, all right, Brian, we're ready for you on set, I get that immediate jolt because I know it's coming, it's real now. And so it's just an internal check-in for myself on, all right, where's this? Because we all have an ideal energy activation level for any given task, no matter what it is. For this podcast right now, there's an ideal energy activation level for both. So
just define what that is. Peak performance energy state, maybe?
It's a physiological, and it's all connected. Physiological, mental, emotional. It's connected in the sense that when my energy activation level is in an ideal state, I'm focused, I'm energized, my muscles flow freely. They're not too tense, but they're also not relaxed. Mentally, I'm able to think clearly. Emotionally, I'm calm, but I'm, again, not relaxed. And I might be energized. I might be experiencing happiness, joy. If I'm too low, if my energy activation level's too low, I might be moving very slowly. I might be hunched over. These are physical indicators. Mentally, I may not be able to retrieve information very easily. I might be forgetting things. Emotionally, I might be irritated or frustrated. And on the flip side, and this is where, in the situation that you're asking about, this is where most people end up, is the too high level. And in that case, physically, the heart starts beating way too fast. All the things associated with the sympathetic nervous system kick in, but to way too high a degree. The heart starts beating more quickly. The breathing becomes rapid and shallow. Mentally, the mind swirls. Again, I can't latch on to any thoughts. My attention will narrow, and I can't see the bigger picture, the broader picture. Emotionally, I'll feel a lot of anxiety. I may be jittery. My muscles will become too tense. Fine motor skills will be compromised. So those are the things that tell me when I'm too high, too low, and just right. And for me, we all have to figure out what our own just right is for whatever the task is. And then once we figure out what that just right energy activation level is for ourselves, we have to figure out where we currently are in relation to it. So question one for anybody is, what is your ideal energy activation level for a given task? Could be given a presentation, could be having a tough conversation with a spouse or significant other. It could be anything. I mean, whatever performance environment you find yourself in, what's your ideal energy activation level? If you're going to coach kids,
that, Yeah, exactly, being present with your kids. But even just waking up and looking at this day as a performance moment, which it is, right? So that morning ritual you described is an opportunity to get into the energy activation level for an ideal day. Same principle, right?
Yeah, it is the same principle. However you define performance, there's an ideal energy activation level for you personally for that task.
Can that change over time? Because someone listening might be like, oh, this is really interesting, Brian. I think my energy activation level is this. But then what happens, I'll use myself as an example, as I've gotten more skillful in using the tools such as breath control and imagery work and internal dialogue and radical attention control, these things that really kind of, stuff that I learned in the SEALs and then have been refining over the years. My flow state zone, let's call it, begins to change and shift. So I have more energy to bring to the performance moment, and the performance goes better, and so there's an iterative kind of upward cycle through turning these skills into a daily practice. That's part of my theory. I'm sure I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
We all change every day. So there's nothing in my experience that would say that our ideal energy activation levels for a given task couldn't also shift. For example, if I'm going to do a car hit or I'm going to wreck a motorcycle, there's an ideal amount of energy activation for that. Well, I've done that a ton over the course of my career. Do I get as worked up about it as I used to? No, I don't. But I don't know that I would say that my ideal energy activation level is different. I would say that I now sometimes have to pump up to get to that ideal energy activation level.
I see. Right.
Whereas before, when I was less experienced, I needed to calm down because I was coming into the situation too high. And so I needed to come down. And now sometimes I have to worry about taking things for granted. I have to say, no, this is still a thing, and it's still important, and it's still dangerous. I need to be at this place. So I find myself having to pump up. But, I don't know that. So for me, I don't know that I've experienced a change in that ideal energy activation level itself for the performance, but I certainly have experienced changes in that level of energy activation prior to that moment of the right before. So during that right before, do I need to pump up or do I need to calm down? Which do I need to do in order to be successful? That has changed.
Right. So you mentioned the breath as the first kind of step. What else? What's the process to get into that ideal?
Yeah.
State?
So for me, it's that check-in with the energy activation level, and I use the breath. Either way, if I'm going to pump up, then I'll get more oxygen into my body more quickly. If I need to calm down, I'll take that breath and connect it with the body. I'll drop the shoulders down. There's a technique called progressive muscle relaxation that is, for those who don't know what that is, you can start at the top or bottom of your body, but if you're going to start at the bottom, for example, you would tense your toes as tightly as possible for 3 to 5 seconds and then just relax for 5 seconds or so. and then tense the calves as tightly as you can for 3 to 5 seconds, and then relax. And you just do that with every muscle group individually up your body until you culminate with the whole body tensing as tightly as you can, and then relax. Now, if you do that exercise, you will sink into whatever it is that you're sitting in or lying in, because it's an incredibly powerful exercise. But the reason I bring it up for this situation is because if you do progressive, at least this has been my experience and that of my clients who have tried it, if we practice progressive muscle relaxation regularly, then we can train our bodies to relax from tension. And so we don't have to tense everything. We don't have to go through every single muscle group. Truly, what I do, I squeeze my fist. I squeeze my fist with an inhale, and I squeeze it as tightly as I can, and then I exhale and relax. And just because I'm relaxing that fist, the rest of my body will relax too. And connecting that with the breath is very helpful for me. There's a physical component to changing that through the breathing, but also through that muscle tension. But attentionally, depending on how far away we are from the thing, I'll go through in my head all the stuff that's going to happen step by step. I'll see it happen using mental imagery. But when we get really close, where I put my attention is just on the first 2 seconds of whatever it's going to be, because I've practiced the other stuff. And I trust that if I get those first 2 seconds right, the dominoes are going to start falling. And if I can get them falling the right direction with those first 2 seconds, those going the way they're supposed to, the rest of the seconds will follow. And that's been my experience. So when I get in those situations, I try to create that ideal energy activation state, and I focus my attention on whatever the first thing is. Whatever it is, whether it's a fight, if it's the first punch or whatever, if it's some other thing, whatever the first thing I have to do in the first couple seconds, that is where my full attention goes. I see it very clearly in my mind. I remind myself exactly what it is, and that's where I stay until action, and then we do it and pick it up and usually do it again. But
That's right. Good, but not good enough. Take 2.
Yeah. That was great. Do it again.
Do it again. What about internal dialogue? Do you have a mantra or, a series of sayings, or how do you maintain kind of a positive dialogue that crowds out doubt and fear and stuff?
I don't have any. The only mantra that I have, and you're old enough to remember this. This is wonderful. I don't know what your audience is, but time to make the donuts. Sometimes I'll get up in the morning and
time to make the donuts,
and I'm just not in the mood for it, and it'll even be sometimes during the day if I'm like, I'm just not in the mood for whatever it is that I'm doing, and I just remind myself, time to make the donuts. Goes back to that Dunkin' Donuts commercial where the guy goes, "Time to make the donuts." Made the donuts. So yeah, it's time to make the donuts. It's time to get up and go do what I do. And so that's been helpful. But throughout the day, Mark, there's not a specific thing, but one thing that I have become better at, and it's been a process. It's taken a long time to even get to where I am, and I have a long way to go to I don't know. I have a long way to go. But to really try to allow pessimistic thoughts to be a red flag for me, to allow them to ping my attention, so to speak, right. Not let them slide by unaware.
That's good. Yeah.
And it's hard though. It's been a challenge becoming aware of them.
When you start that process, you see how often they show up and how frequent, well, that's the same thing, but how persistent and pervasive they can be, because, our brains are like wired to be negative and fearful, and we're pumped full of that information. And so just to become aware of it is a huge step forward.
Yeah, and that's something to address. I mean, that's an important point. I will say that pessimism is wrong, but you're right. We are wired in a way that our attention is very easily captured by things that we perceive as wrong. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That can be a very adaptive thing, to notice what's wrong in our environment so that we can fix it. When we notice this is an important thing too, that when we start talking about emotions, because I'll talk about negative emotions and positive emotions. And that's not to say that negative emotions are called negative emotions like anger or sadness or anxiety or anything like that. Those we consider negative emotions. Positive emotions, we consider joy, awe, interest, curiosity. These are positive emotions. But it's not that one's good and one's bad. It's just that we like to experience one, the positive emotions, and we don't like to experience the other, the negative emotions. But the negative emotions are very helpful. They will narrow our attention and our focus to what is wrong in our environment that's driving those emotions so that we can fix it. That they help us pinpoint things that can be fixed. It can be helpful.
I agree with that. I just want to kind of pin something there. I look at the negative emotions as catalyzing emotions, meaning that they're there to get your attention for a reason. Get off the X in the SEALs, we would say. Well, there's a lot of fear and, negative emotions. But if you dwell in the negative emotions, they become chronic because the energy of the negative emotions is, vibrationally, it's at a lower quality, let's just say. And so if you dwell there, you're actually going to end up doing harm to yourself over time. And it certainly will destroy your performance moment. So if I hear anyone say, yeah, anger is a really good motivator for performance, I say, be careful with that one, right? It's okay to activate it. Like in that performance mode, it's okay to activate you like, I'm going to get this done or do it for whatever reason that sparks that anger. But then you got to release that into the positive side, of courage, right? Or acceptance, get to that higher energy state.
Yeah, there are a couple things with that. And one is Seneca wrote an essay called On Anger that I think is a fantastic thing that anybody who does believe that anger should be their primary motivator, they should go find Seneca's work and read it immediately. The negative emotions can be helpful, but you're right. If we're sitting in them, if we're dwelling in them, because they come from a place of lack and wrong. For example, if we're feeling anger, it's because we perceive that somebody did something wrong to us. Something happened to us that's bad. Somebody, wronged us in some way. Sadness, we've lost something we value or care about. Nervousness and anxiety, we perceive a threat of some kind. It's all tied to perception. And that's where we can make the change. So if we recognize, hey, I'm really nervous and scared right now, which those two things aren't necessarily the same thing, and we can parse that if you want to. Right. But if I'm perceiving a threat of some kind, I can switch that around. Like, okay, is it a threat or is it an opportunity?
Right.
Is this really something that's bad that could happen, or really am I leaning into something that's a challenge that could be great for me? It's just about what we talked about a little while ago, and it's that change of perspective, that change of focus, that the perception of our situations is entirely up to us. We can focus on and prioritize any aspect of our circumstances that we want. And in the process of doing that, we are also going to affect the emotions that we experience. So we have control over that.
Yeah, I'm being reminded right now of, learning to parachute jump in as a SEAL, from 20,000 feet at night. And, you're on your fourth or fifth jump and there you are already free falling. And the fear that you feel initially, is existential because you're jumping to your death until you pull that parachute ripcord. But we learn, of course, through the repetition and through the example of others and through the breath, right? Because we're really, focus on those performance drivers in the SEALs as well. And what happens is pretty quickly, the energy of that fear, which is not dissimilar from the energy of anger or, those other kind of lower negative energies, because it can be destabilizing, debilitating. You can transmute that into actually excitement, right? Like we're going to do this. So it could be mission. You can call it what you want. And this is part of like owning your perspective. And so for me, I would shift it to anticipation of having an excellent parachute jump or an excellent mission, right? So the same energy of fear transmutes to anticipation or excitement, but it changes the quality of that energy, which then changes the emotional experience, right? From one that could be debilitating and negative to one that's really positive and reinforcing.
Yeah, well, you just brought up an incredibly important point that actually I just talked to a client yesterday who brought this up as something that during a performance moment, he remembered me saying it and it was very valuable for him. And that is that nervousness and fear and excitement, physiologically, there's no difference between them. If all we were doing was looking at the physiological measures of a person, we could not tell if they were experiencing fear or they were experiencing excitement. It's totally in our minds as to which one it is. We're either leaning in or we're leaning out. We're either approaching or we're trying to avoid. It's either a challenge or it's a threat. And those are the things that are going to determine whether we are nervous or whether we're excited. And you're absolutely correct. From the physiological standpoint, they're all the same. And we can use that physiological activation to our benefit, for sure. And if we change the perception along with it, why am I feeling this way? Well, because it's go time. I'm getting ready to do it. This is the performance moment. Of course I'm feeling like this. Of course my heart's racing. Of course my breathing is, becoming a little bit more rapid. My body's activating. It's preparing me to do the thing that I'm about to do. And thank goodness it is, because I'm looking forward to it. If that's the perception that we have, man, it does. It's a game changer.
Yeah, we say in the SEAL Fit training, where your mind leads, the body will follow. So first, get your mind right, perceive it accurately, or in a performance state, and the body kind of comes along, gets gets oriented for that performance.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is it works the other way too. And anybody who's worked out has experienced that. You may go into a workout dragging and feeling like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. This sucks. I hate it. And then you get into the workout and your body does what it does, and hormones and different neurotransmitters start getting secreted. Next thing you know, the workout's over and you're feeling great. So it's a whole different, it works both ways. And I try to make sure my clients know that too. Like, look, you can go top down, meaning change how you're thinking, and that will influence your body. Or you can change what's going on in your body, and that's going to influence your mind and how it is that you're thinking there too. Same, it's like sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, your mind, your mood, your patience level, all of that stuff is going to deteriorate. You get more sleep, which is a physical thing, and all of a sudden now you're thinking better. You're perceiving things differently. You got a better mood, you got more patience.
And ultimately, you do those together, right? The bottom up, top down, you activate it together, and then boom, that pre-event, immediate pre-event. What do you call that moment?
The
that
right
phase?
before? Yeah, the right before. Yeah, phase
You call it
2,
the
right before. Yeah, just call it right before.
It's powerful. So you get the body and the mind activated immediately right before, and then you go in there, and then you maintain that flow state through the attention on the task, that radical focus on the task, calm breathing, right? It all just starts to, energize into one experience.
Yeah.
Where there really isn't much separation between you and the object, the experience. And everything becomes one. That's what flow is, right? When your ego kind of steps aside and you have this experience of life flowing through you, unobstructed.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't know if you've ever listened to any of Sam Harris's stuff, but he does a really good job in a lot of his talks and certainly his meditations that I've listened to about pointing out, helping people realize that we are our experiences. There aren't two of us. There's not a one of us just kind of floating around out there watching the other. We are what it is that we're experiencing. And so for me, another thing that's been very helpful is mindful meditation, focusing really on being present and noticing thoughts, just simply like I notice breath, or like I notice, something itching. I mean, it's just another thing that my brain and body, it's just another source of energy that I'm perceiving in a certain way, because that's what thoughts are. They're connections among neurons in our heads, and they come and they go. They're ephemeral. They're short-lived. They're in, they're out. And really noticing that has also helped me a lot, because we can get very locked into certain thoughts, and we can really treat those thoughts as if, like I said earlier, like they are the reality, and we can get wrapped up in them, and that can be very, very unhelpful. If we can just recognize thoughts as thoughts, this is what's going on in my head right now, and that's it. In this experience, in this moment, this is how I am. That's helped me achieve that flow state, that bubble that I've talked about. And you described it very, very well. It is one of those things I get asked about a lot. And it's one of the hardest things to describe to people, at least in my experience, because, I get that way when I'm on and doing stunts, but I also ride dirt bikes. And one of the reasons why I love getting on my dirt bike is for the time that I'm on that dirt bike, be it on a trail or on a track, there is nothing else. The motorcycle and I are one with the track and the trees.
Subject, object kind of merge.
Everything,
right?
Yeah, it is all one. If you've never experienced it, and most people have experienced it, most people have in some capacity, but if you haven't, I don't know that anybody could just get it from what it is that I'm saying. It really is an experiential thing.
I'm really glad you mentioned this, or we're talking about this, because I'm a lifelong martial artist and meditation practitioner myself, starting when I was 21, and heavily influenced by Eastern philosophy, psychology, spirituality. And this is a central tenet, right, of that philosophy, the Vedic philosophies, right, that we are all life force, Sat Chit Ananda, it's described, being, consciousness, bliss, being experienced through this temporal body that also has conditioning from its lifetime of experiences and being, how we were conditioned and taught to think. And so the body, brain, and those experiences represent kind of our identity as a separate self. And we forget that, or we lose sight of, maybe as a child we had it, but as we get older, we get further and further away from this universal experience of all isness, of oneness, that unity consciousness. And so it's talked about almost as an object of something over there that, is aspirational, right? Or maybe you experience it after death. Or you'll find it in a moment, but it's something you have to attain, right? And so this is a big misperception. It's not something you have to attain, it's something we are.
Yeah, we just have to notice it.
You just have to notice it. You just have to slow down and pay attention. And that's where the mindfulness meditation comes in. And in a very more Western sense, these kind of extreme sports and endurance sports, right? And even being a Navy SEAL, you kind of refine your mind to the point where the ego finally steps aside and you get to experience that. And that's the flow moment where subject, object are, missing and everything is just pure experiencing. I think it's cool that we have the ability, through conversations like this to help, we'll say Westerners, because most of our clients, most people are listening are kind of brought up in the Western mindset model, to get them some language and some pointers and some conversation where it just says, okay, hey, take the mystery out of all that. Forget about, I call it taking the foo out of the kung fu. Forget about all that flowery language of the Bhagavad Gita or, Yogananda's teachings or the Yoga Sutras, because it's inaccessible for most Westerners. They don't get it. They don't speak the language. They don't understand it. But you can find the principle is very simple, right? It's all about attention and opening the aperture and, like you said, very beautiful, moving away from thoughts, seeing thoughts as happening to you, not by you. Then you just kind of become a more open kind of vessel for that life force to flow more freely, and you'll experience more flow. Simultaneously, we can use these tools to kind of hack our way there, like we've talked about, using the breath, dialogue, imagery, whatnot.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me, and one of the things that it led to the title of my book, at least the subtitle, utilized the wisdom of Eastern and Western ideologies to achieve your full potential, is that there's so much overlap. And this surprised me as I was reading, because I went through the master's and the Ph.D. So there were Western scientific studies, different theories that I came across in terms of psychology and performance and all the stuff. But then when I started getting into more of the Eastern philosophy, like you just mentioned, several of them, the overlap was, you can't miss it. It was slap in the face clear that a lot of the things that were talked about in Eastern philosophy 2,000, 2,500 years ago are things that are still theoretically and scientifically, we've shown it through experiment and the science that we have to work, to be helpful, that this connection exists. Descartes' dualism, the mind-body complete separation, it doesn't seem to hold up in what it is that we're seeing in science. And that's, like I said, that's a central tenet of the Eastern philosophy and has been for thousands of years. This idea of, like you put it, this oneness, that we just are connected. We are interwoven in this gigantic spider web of energy and matter, which is also energy. and so, it's all connected and you can't separate yourself from it. There's just no way. And embracing that, it can be very, very powerful and can help lead to some of these flow moments that you and I have just been talking about.
Yeah. And as we wind down, it also can help you lead to greater, connection to others, a greater sense of purpose or alignment, with your purpose, which is what the Bhagavad Gita was all about. Really, is all about this idea of karma and dharma. Arjuna was going to basically breach his karmic duty and not go to war, but he was a warrior, right? And so that was his calling. That was his dharma. And Krishna's there saying, you know what, dude, if you don't go to war and fight your uncles, right, you're just going to bring more suffering upon yourself and hence the universe. So do your duty, basically. So my point there is doing this work and aligning, kind of marrying East and West and understanding the profundity of that can lead to greater capacity to just be at peace with the way things are. Because the Eastern model says things happen, things are the way they are, so be okay with it. It's the opposite of the Western model says it's the law of cause and effect, duality, I think, therefore I am, so go out and change it. And so the Eastern model is the opposite of that. It's anti-Cartesian. It says I am, and I also think, right? And you can even say I am, and therefore I think. It's the opposite. It's a flip side of Descartes. And that everything's okay. And so just be okay. And so a lot of Westerners say, well, things aren't okay. I don't like my life. And the Eastern model is like, okay, be okay with it, but you can still strive to change aspects of it to have a better experience.
Mm-hmm. And that's a paradox.
They're hand in glove. They work together.
That's a
The yin and
paradox.
yang.
Yeah, it seems very. That's a weird thing. What you just said is
Yeah.
things just are. They are flowing. The energy's happening. We are caught in it, and we just need to accept that. And the quicker we can accept it, the faster we will be able to move things in a different direction. And then people say, wait a minute, if we can move it, then we're not caught in it. No, we are. We're there. We are immersed in and not at all separate from everything happening around us. And we do need to accept that. And the sooner we do and recognize exactly where we are, then we can make some changes. At the beginning of my book, and then there's another book chapter coming out too pretty soon where I wrote about this concept too. For me, 3 things happen, and they need to happen in this order in order for us to move ourselves in a little bit better direction. Number 1 is self-awareness. Mm-hmm. We have to be aware. We can't change something we're not aware of. So we have to tune into what is. How are we thinking? What are we feeling? And how is that influencing our environments? Once we have that awareness, then we have to accept. And not accept from a resignation standpoint or a give up standpoint. It's acceptance of just acknowledging this is reality right now in this moment. This is where I am. I can like it. I can not like it. Whatever it is, it just is. This is my reality now. And once I've accepted that, now I can do the next part. I can take action. I can self-regulate. And I can do that through all the techniques we've been talking about. I can pay attention to how I'm thinking and what types of perceptions I tend to have, pessimistic versus optimistic. I can pay attention to how I talk to people and the level of empathy that I have and patience for. But I can take these self-regulatory steps to control not only myself, but in a way that influences my environment. That's how that works. I mean, we have to have the awareness first, but then we have to accept. We can't jump straight from awareness to the self-regulation. We have to sit in it a second and make sure that we truly understand where we are so that we're not just, throwing darts at a board blindly, trying to make changes that really don't need to be made. We need to be aware and then accept. Then the regulatory steps that we take are probably going to be more likely to be effective. So that's
awesome.
That's an approach that I take with that.
No, I appreciate that. That's very practical, and it's probably a great place to kind of wrap things up here. So your book is Begin Again, Utilize the Wisdom of Eastern and Western Ideologies to Achieve Your Full Potential. Love that. It's available right now. Is it in the marketplace?
Yep, it's available on Amazon. You can go there and buy it right now if you want to. And probably about halfway through volume 2 of that.
Okay.
I had such a great time writing the first one. Kind of what you mentioned at the beginning. What do you do, Brian, to set yourself up? Well, I can.
It's a bunch of sticky notes.
Yeah,
you had more sticky notes.
It is. When I run out of sticky notes, then I'll stop writing these volumes.
You'll be done.
For now, I'm keeping on going. So I'm about halfway through another one. You can be on the lookout for that maybe in another 6 months to a year. We'll see how time plays out. I have a couple other books that are coming too. Mental Strength for Entrepreneurs. One is designed for entrepreneurs themselves to use the different skills and concepts for their own well-being. And then the other book is geared more for entrepreneurs to take advantage of those skills to create climates and environments for those they lead, to set conditions for success of those who are part of their organizations. So those books are coming out as well. And then I mentioned another book chapter. I wrote a chapter for a book called The Change, which will be out probably around the same time this podcast comes out. It's supposed to be out about 2-3 weeks from now. So,
and where can people find that?
You can find that on Amazon as well. And I can send you a link to it too if you want, and you can attach
that'd be
it
helpful.
to
We
the
can
podcast.
put that in the show notes.
But I can certainly do that. And, just to remind everybody too, the business that I've had is Begin Again Performance Psychology. I do work with athletes, singers, dancers, musicians. I do keynote addresses as well for businesses, organizations around resilience, around performance. Risk-taking is another topic that I've focused on. And I'm rebranding now. It's going to be Brian Hite Global. That's going to be where we're going next.
Hey everyone, this is Mark Devine, founder of SealFit and Unbeatable Mind, and I'm super stoked to announce that my new book, Uncommon is due out from St. Martin's Press this summer, July 16th. And we've launched a pre-order campaign. You can learn more about that at readuncommon.com to try to get early awareness for the book, which I hope will help a lot of people, where I go and do a deep dive on the 5 mountains of personal mastery: physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual. Uncommon, simple principles for an extraordinary life. Check it out at readuncommon.com. And thank you for your support and being part of the change that you want to see in this world. Hoo-yah, divine out.
Awesome.
So,
Well, good luck with that, Brian. Thanks for the work you do. Thanks for this conversation. It's been really fun and enlightening, and I appreciate you.
I
Let me know if you can help
appreciate
me
you.
anyway.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.